If I had only $5,000 to reinvest into my B&B, I would spend 3,500 out of that 5,000 on
Mm,
redoing my photos and making sure that the way I'm presenting myself online is as professional as it possibly can be. If I do not have professional photography, and I'm talking like architectural digest, well done, twilight photos, drone photography, maybe some videography in there for social media. If you redid the bedding and you redid the photos, that 5 grand would make you ten to $15,000 more a year instantly.
Welcome to another episode of the STR Sisterhood. I'm your host, Stacey St. John, and I am so delighted to spend a few minutes with you today. Now, before we jump into this episode, you know it, I'm going to share a quote with you that I recently read. And it says, "Words lie, actions can lie too. Consistency speaks the truth." Boy, isn't that the case? Consistency speaks the truth. Who we are day in and day out speaks the truth. Those beautiful words come to us from Canadian actress Lily Singh. Now, in this episode, OMG, we are sitting down with renowned designer Sarah Glidewell, and we are diving deep into functionality of design, the ROI of design. And I got to pick her brain about so many fun things. So you might want to grab a pen and a piece of paper because you're probably going to jot down some notes. So without further ado, let's jump into my conversation with Sarah. So, Sarah, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you so much for having us on. I'm so excited to be here.
Well, we are excited to chat with you. So, first and foremost, if our listeners aren't familiar with who you are and what you do, share a little bit about that with us.
Yeah, absolutely. So, my name's Sarah Glidewell. I have been in the real estate or Airbnb specific space for, I guess, going on 7 years now. We started in 2019, which it's crazy to think that it's already been 7 years. But a little bit about our background. I started in Airbnb. I come from a world of design and architecture before the Airbnb journey kind of started for us. But the journey started for us in investing in Airbnbs when my husband started building an insurance company. It started doing really well. And he was like, "Look, I think I'm going to be able to retire you from the architecture world." And I love working. I've always been very entrepreneurial. I've always enjoyed being kind of part of the hustle and bustle when it comes to having a career. And so being done working just didn't really sit well with me. And so we made a deal a long time ago that he would make the money and I would make the money grow. And I didn't really know what that meant at that point in time. I knew nothing about the stock market. I really didn't understand anything about Airbnb or real estate investing in general. But just having that architecture and interior design background, the second I got introduced to Airbnb, I was like, this is something that I understand. This is something that I feel like I have an edge in. And this is something that I feel like we can pour any expendable income into to continue making our money grow. And so that's how it started 7 years ago. And we started with Airbnb arbitrage, just like a lot of people do, or especially back then, what a lot of people were doing. And eventually it just grew into something where we were purchasing houses, we were partnering in houses. And so we've kind of grown it into something now that my husband has sold his insurance company and come over to the real estate world full time. So we didn't see that coming, but it was a happy mistake, I suppose.
He's come full circle. I love it so much. I love it. I want to, I love that not only you are offering design services, but you are also an investor yourself because I feel like so often I see designers who may not have that investing experience. And oftentimes, while a property might look beautiful, it might not function as beautifully. So that's one of the things that I'm excited to talk with you about today, for sure. For sure. So let's talk about design versus strategy. Obviously, you work with so many different investors. From your perspective, what do you feel like is the difference between designing a beautiful space versus designing a profitable short term rental?
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that's such a good question. And honestly, when we got into this 7 years ago, it was something that I was really paying attention to back then, even because it felt like there wasn't really any traditional designers that were doing Airbnb specific, and there weren't any hotel designers that were doing Airbnb either. And so there's
Mhm.
just this big gap in the market where everybody was just throwing used furniture into their cottage or their apartment or whatever, and they were letting it run, and anything was working on Airbnb. And I would just stay at these Airbnbs and I'm like, nothing about this functions well. Like you can tell that maybe they thought that the sofa looked good or that this art piece went with the sofa, but they weren't thinking about the guest function at all. And
Mhm.
so that was something that we really started honing in on right away. And so what I always tell people is when you're designing a regular residential home, there's a lot of emotion that goes behind every selection because you want it to feel very personal. You want it to feel very you. You want it to function around your daily routines and traffic patterns. And it just gets a lot more complicated when you start thinking about designing for Airbnbs because you're designing for a wide array of people. Like you may
Mhm.
have a honed in demographic, but nonetheless, you want to take care of both the grandma, the grandpa, the mom, the dad, the kids, and the grandkids, all that may be staying in that property together. And so when we think about designing for Airbnbs in general, we of course want it to, from a marketing perspective, be beautiful, be clean, photograph well, do all the marketing that it needs to do before the guest even gets there. But then we want the design itself to function in a way that's almost like an additional surprise and delight for the guest, where you're constantly communicating with the guest without actually physically being there or verbally exchanging a sentence with them and reminding them constantly that you care. And you can do that in a lot of ways, whether it be like towel hooks or comfortable bedding or enough towels for people to have a towel for the hot tub and a towel for their shower, or quality cooking utensils or knives that aren't wobbly when you're trying to cut your vegetables. Like it really comes down to all these nitty gritty details of thinking through that guest experience and how you are spoiling them around every corner.
I love that spoiling them. I
Yeah,
love that.
absolutely.
What are some of your favorite ways to spoil guests?
Yeah. Oh, there's so many. I think a lot of the areas that we decide to spoil our guests in comes from my husband and I have gotten a taste for luxury travel. And so whenever we are now traveling, the thing that we splurge on the most is the accommodation because it's a learning tool for us. And we learn a lot of the tricks along the way of just these moments where we light up when we're staying
Mhm.
at different spaces. And so just today I was talking on my Instagram story. Someone asked a question of like the design moments in your house that guests compliment the most. And a few of those are, for example, one, we have hot tubs at all of our B&Bs and we're in the Midwest. So the B&Bs are covered in snow for 6 months out of the year. And so what we did in our B&Bs, and we stole this from a boutique hotel, I think in Norway, where they had the disposable spa slippers that you could put on to then travel out to the spa, as opposed to you having to either wear tennis shoes with your bathing suit and towel wrapped around you, or maybe you remembered your slides. Like just having something to protect your feet from the snow. Another one is we went to a luxury hotel in San Diego, I think. And when we walked in on the bedside, there was a little linen spray. And it was like this non toxic, helps you sleep, lavender infused linen spray. And I remember the hotel room was incredible, but just that little linen spray was like, wow, you even care about the quality of sleep that I'm getting on top of the nice sheets and the nice mattress. And
Mhm.
so we put linen sprays in our B&Bs now that are non-toxic that people can take with them to bring it back home. We put Andes candies in a little jar right next to the bed. So when they crawl into bed, they have a little snack before they go to sleep. And so it's all these little moments that I love putting into the B&Bs that don't necessarily show up on the photos when they're booking the B&B, but as they're
Mhm.
experiencing their stay, they're just having these little moments of like, oh, this host really does care about me.
I love that so much. And, it's funny from an operational perspective, I'm immediately thinking about the chocolate that's going to get on the pillowcase. Um, so you know, I think it's important that we balance that magical moment that you've created for your guest. And from an operational side, maybe it's just making sure, all right, on the backside, we need to make sure we've got plenty of stain remover, right? For the cleaners, if there are stains on the pillowcases from the chocolate, I think
Yeah.
it's, I think that's really, really cool that you do those little micro surprise and delights. And the other thing is those don't cost bazillions of dollars, right?
Right. Right, exactly. Well, and you bring up a good point. Another topic that I was just talking about with someone on moments of surprise and delight or moments where you really feel like the host thought through that guest experience. And I go to B&Bs all the time that don't leave out enough towels for both you to take a shower and if you have hot tub, cold plunge, pool, lake, river, like whatever the water feature is that people are putting on their bathing suit and then coming back inside. People will always say, well, hey, I only put out one or two towels for guests because they get stained and I don't want them to use a million of them. But then when I stay at these B&Bs, when you go out to the hot tub, there are no hooks for the towels. And so it's like, of course, they're dropping them on the ground and getting them covered in dirt. Like if you thought about the guest experience and that entire process of them getting in and out of the hot tub, you would know that they need a hook and then therefore you wouldn't be staining towels. It's both function and surprise and delight.
Amen. I want to talk about the fact that sometimes pretty doesn't always book. From your perspective and in your experience, what are some spaces or what are some aspects of spaces that you've seen that look pretty maybe on Instagram, but actually may underperform on Airbnb? What does some of that look like?
Ooh, look pretty online, but don't actually perform. Well, I think I have a pet peeve in the Airbnb space right now of the fact that it feels like a lot of the B&Bs that are coming out right now and being posted live online feel very Carnival-esque to me. Like the design is like your eye doesn't have anywhere to rest, and they're spending so much money on making sure that every wall in the house is a different color, the ceiling's a different color, there's neon signs everywhere, everything's bright, everything's punchy, everything's screaming for attention. And I don't necessarily think that that's working. Like that's working better than a B&B perhaps that wasn't designed at all and it's got grandma and grandpa's furniture in there and an iPhone photo of, grandpa holding a fish, right? Like I will still choose
Mhm.
the Carnival B&B over that. But part of me feels like people are spending too much time and attention making every single element of their B&B design be punchy and in your face and loud,
Mhm.
as opposed to maybe reeling it back, having some refinement in that design, and then taking that budget that they saved on not having to do wallpaper on every single wall and allocating it to the amenities that people are actually going to use. And
Mm.
when I'm guiding anyone through where to spend their money on their B&B, I'm always prioritizing the things that I think are going to get the most traffic for their guest avatar. Like I would always, every day out of the week, prioritize a sauna or a hot tub over spending an additional 3 grand and making sure that you've got every color under the rainbow plus 7 neon signs in your bedrooms in your house. And so that's
Mhm.
the area that I think that people are spending too much time thinking through marketing on Airbnb and being the loudest in the room, as opposed to having some of these amenities that are actually the thing that converts the guest into a guest that's staying at your B&B.
Yeah, no, that's a good call out. And I do see that as well. And it's interesting because I can see where some of the carnivalesque approach may work until every property looks carnivalesque in that market. And then, oh my gosh, what are we setting ourselves apart with?
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Yep. That's exactly it. I think that, when somebody becomes a top performer in an Airbnb market, then I think a lot of people who don't necessarily trust or understand design, they feel this major obligation to copy and paste because
Mm,
they've got the data that supports it. They can see that it's working for this other person. And I don't think that's necessarily wrong to do. Like, I think that that's a safe bet, but you lose your ability to differentiate yourself from that competitor and go for a slightly different demographic. For
mhm.
example, I think like in Nashville, there are probably 15 different pinked out disco ball, all the bells and whistles for a bachelorette party
Mhm.
space. But the reality is that not like that bachelorettes are going to Nashville. The reality is that not every single bachelorette loves the color pink, right? Or loves the disco ball theme. And so I wish that there were more hosts in the Airbnb space who are saying, okay, look, this person's making a ton of money by targeting bachelorette parties. Why don't we go in a different direction and design something that looks like breakfast at Tiffany's or something that just is slightly different than this like very obvious gaudy pink option and still understand that that theme works, that demographic is perfect to target, but let's do it in a different way as opposed to just copy and pasting everybody else's.
Okay, I want to move. I have so many fun things to ask you. Thank you so much for answering these. I want to throw something else at you. Okay.
Okay.
If someone has 5,000 bucks to invest in upgrades for their property, what do you think the most impactful things are that would drive their nightly rate up?
Love that question. If I had only $5,000 to reinvest into my B&B, first and foremost, if I do not have professional photography, and I'm talking like architectural digest, well done, twilight photos, drone photography, maybe some videography in there for social media, I would spend 3,500 out of that 5,000 on
Mm,
redoing my photos and making sure that the way I'm presenting myself online is as professional as it possibly can be. With the additional 1,500 out of that 3,500, I would take a look at my linens specifically and I would replace any quilt, any dingy comforter, any old dingy duvet, any sheets that aren't white, and I would just redo the bedding to be that hotel quality, crisp, clean white bedding. And I feel like if you redid the bedding, if you redid the photos, that 5 grand would make you ten to $15,000 more a year instantly.
okay, I love that. Now, because your answer was so phenomenal, I'm going to give you 5,000 more dollars. What would
Okay.
you do next?
Ooh, an additional 5,000 on top of that. I think first and foremost, I would be looking at my competition to see what the top performers have that I don't have. Hone in on who your demographic is in that market. And so it could be families, it could be couples, it could be bachelorette parties, it could be multi-generational, whatever that is. If you could understand who your clientele is and then how your top competitors that are beating you right now are outperforming you, I would look at the amenity that like go through their reviews and read what people are writing about. And if it's that, oh my gosh, this place had bikes and we could pedal around town and we just loved that experience with the bikes. Or, oh, we stayed up late in the hot tub every single night. Or, oh, we used this golf simulator nonstop. Or like whatever the thing is that you're seeing people in the reviews comment on the most, that's where I would allocate that next $5,000 because you're already proven that other people love it and it's working
Mm,
for your competition. So don't try and reinvent the wheel. Just try and get closer and closer to beating that competition that's currently beating you.
love that. That's so strategic. I love
Yeah,
that. What a
absolutely.
great answer.
Yeah, you gotta make
Okay. So we talked a little bit about the properties that look like Ringling Brothers has come and there's colors on every wall and ceiling. I want to also ask you about some other design mistakes, perhaps, that you're seeing people make. What would you say the top three design mistakes are that you see from others?
Mm. Wow, there are so many in the B&B space in general. I think one thing that a lot of people do wrong when it comes to design is they don't necessarily think through splurge, like where they need to splurge and where they need to reel back. And
Mm,
so a lot of times what I see is that nobody wants to swallow the pill of having to spend three to four to $5,000 on a sofa. But
mhm,
reality is that when people are hanging out throughout the day, that sofa is seeing more traffic than any other portion of your home. And so it's just not the spot to reel back in. And so
Mm,
same thing with like the dining table. Like if people are not sitting on the sofa, they're at the dining table. And especially if you're targeting families or multi-generational families, probably one of the best parts that they're excited for on traveling is getting grandma's cooking or mom's cooking. And so everybody's in that kitchen together. It's this nostalgic moment in this unfamiliar place. And so they don't provide seating for everyone to have this big meal together. And so I always try and get our clients to understand that they need to be willing to spend more money on making sure that every single person feels thought about throughout their stay. It's like if you're hosting 12 people and you only have a dining table that seats six, that's sad for the other six people who are going to either have to take a turn or stand or sit on the sofa or whatever else. So I
mhm,
feel like carrying that number throughout the entire experience, whether it be dining table, living room, whatever, is super important. I think another one that a design mistake, and I guess it's not really a mistake, but it's definitely something that is increasing our ROI on our B&Bs is understanding how to cater to your off season. And so
mm,
what I mean by that is we're in the Midwest, right? Like we know that our high season is Memorial Day to Labor Day, and we know that that's when we're going to be making 50% of our revenue, if not more. And so when I work with people who are in any sort of a seasonal market, it's like they are so focused on making sure that they're getting that top dollar out of that high season traffic. And so all of their additional income goes into amenities that are specific to summer, or if they're in Colorado, maybe specific to winter. And I think about it in the opposite way. I think, okay, in Michigan, I know my house is a lakefront property. It wouldn't matter if I was doing the bare minimum. My B&B is going to be booked all summer long, no matter what. That's when all of the traffic is happening. What I want to be paying attention to is how do I keep that same amount of traffic year round? And so
mhm,
we really focus on in the Michigan market specifically, how do we outfit our B&Bs with amenities that are just as attractive in the winter as they are in the summer so that we are just as attractive to book in the winter as we are in the summer. And so that's one shift that I always try and get our clients to pay attention to is you're not going to struggle in your high season regardless of whether you are the top property or the fifth property. But in that slow season, when there's only a few travelers coming, how do you stand out as the best? And let's pour some more money in that area.
so interesting. I love that. And I'm just curious, in my market, so the vast majority of my properties are located in Myrtle Beach, South Carolina. Okay. In that market, we are in condo resort buildings. So, think high rises where in one building, you've got maybe 600 competitors, right? And so with that comes a lot of properties that have the exact same layout, that have the exact same exterior amenities, and also have limited space for amenities on the inside, right?
Yep.
Because we're in tight quarters. In
Yeah.
that type of a scenario, what would your recommendation be? Because we are in a very seasonal market as well.
Yeah. That's such a good question. I would say I'm very familiar with this type of a problem as well because we still have several arbitrage units in an apartment complex in Texas. And the whole building is B&Bs. So although we have several B&Bs in that building, there are plenty of other operators with B&Bs in that building. And so I will constantly stalk those other properties to see where ours is lining up in comparison to theirs. And so in that case scenario, at least what we did, two things. One, we tried to really double down on a theme in those B&Bs specifically, as opposed to just making it feel like a clean, comfortable, well outfitted condo. So,
Okay.
for example, ours is in downtown Fort Worth. And the building, we ended up finding out that the history of it is allegedly it used to be a Bonnie and Clyde hideout, which is kind of cool for that building. It has a little bit of a story to it, but we themed it. We call it the Fort Worth Rebel Room. And we put these like huge mugshots of famous musicians on the wall. We have like handcuffs above the bed. We have a photo wall of somebody, like we have all these little plaques that says like, guilty of all these funny things. and they can stand against a wall and it literally looks like they're taking a mug shot. And that property has made nearly double what the other properties have in that same building by just going
Mm,
all out with a theme that is very true to the area that it's in, true to the building that it's in. But also when it came to photographing that building, it's like, okay, I know that I'm going to have the same photos of all the exterior amenities, the exterior of the building, the layout's the same, the floor plan's going
mhm,
to be the same. So when I'm working with my photographer, I have to make sure that they are capturing as many of the moments of surprise and delight that maybe otherwise I wouldn't need to photograph for a regular residential home that doesn't have as much close competition. And
mm.
so with the photographer, I'm saying, okay, I need you to photograph this nightstand that's got chocolates on it. I need you to photograph the shampoo bottles with this non toxic shampoo that I put in here. I need you to photograph the welcome basket with all of this extra stuff that I provide that the person that I share a wall with doesn't provide. And just
Right.
those little tiny micro moments, including those in your listing, so that when they are looking at like true apples to apples comparison, you're just a hair above and maybe you're at the same price so that you become the obvious choice.
Love that. So good. So the Rebel Room, that's a really great idea. I'm curious, how did you find out that this was potentially a former Bonnie and Clyde hideout? Did you Google the building? Like how would someone find out those details?
Yeah, we ended up Googling the building. We asked the landlord that we have in that building if they had any information on it. But when we started Googling that specific building, it's called the Crest Building in Fort Worth. And so it's a historic building. There's a lot of verbiage on it online. And so that just was like a repeating theme on every single article that we read about it. Because I was just hitting a brick wall, like when it came to designing it, I had looked at how everybody else did it, and all of the other operators in that building were great. They weren't offering a crap product by any stretch of the imagination. And so I just was like, there has to be some sort of a nugget in here that I can run with to make mine feel so much different and so much more of an experience than the next guy over.
Mhm. Love that. So good. So good. I want to talk with you about, obviously we've spoken a lot about guest experience, and a lot of designers these days are talking about ideal guest avatars, which I think is so important that we're recognizing who our guests are and really, really diving deep into that avatar. So many folks are thinking about surface level, like who they are, how much money they make, how many kids they have, where they live, all that kind of fun stuff. I really find that we need to be looking at what are the things that they're afraid of. What are the emotions that they're thinking through when they're booking? What are they fearful about if they book the wrong property? With your experience and when you are working with your clients, how do you get to those emotional levels of the guest avatar so that you can truly surprise and delight them in the best way possible?
Great question. I love that you're digging into it at the level that you're digging into it already. Like you're already going further than any of my clients are going, or further than most people are going. I think one thing it's a challenge across the board in really being able to put yourself in somebody else's shoes. And so what I've found is like, if you ask me, I am a millennial, no kids, double income, loves to travel, traveler, right? And so I deeply understand what I love and what I don't love when I travel. And I mean, I can get down into the like nitty gritty details of what I love and what I don't love. And so what I've found is that when we're designing B&Bs, it's easy for me to design for people like me. And so when I'm investing in a B&B of my own that I am an owner on, I'm designing it around my demographic because I know that that's how I'm going to get this B&B to turn out the strongest, right?
Mhm.
Because it's got the most data available on it because it's specifically for me and people like me. But when I'm working with clients who are targeting maybe families and I don't have a kid, right? That's the demographic that I can understand to a certain degree where I'm like, okay, make sure you've got the pack compliant, make sure you've got, some of this child safety stuff. But I do not understand the anxieties that a mom has or a dad has. I don't understand the weight of traveling with a kid and what kind of challenges that brings. And so what I always try and do is with our clients who have a very specific clientele that they're trying to serve, I will go and find people who fit that demographic to have a conversation with them around what would make a big difference for them. And so
Mhm.
you'll see in my Instagram stories quite often, I'll post like, parents, what am I missing? And I'll have an entire list of, stuff that I'm including in a B&B design for a family targeted B&B. And people are ready to give you that feedback because they've felt the pain of not having those things. And so
Mhm.
it's like you just have to ask, right? And you'll figure out that everyone's got an opinion. It's just they don't always give their opinion in a review, or they don't want to offend the person that, the B&B that they're staying in. But when you're asking online where it's, not something that's super personal to me, but I really am genuinely asking for my own market research, people will let you know. So I just always tell people, if you don't have a social media reach like I have, like, figure out who fits that demographic that you're trying to serve, and then get into an in-depth conversation with them about all the pain points they've experienced while traveling and what would have made those pain points go away.
Love it. That's so good. And to your point, actually makes things so much easier because you don't have to figure it out yourself, right?
Right.
Hack into somebody else's knowledge and experience.
Yeah, there's no way that I'm gonna have all the right answers of what a mom and a dad is gonna want in a B&B, right? Like, I have to outsource that to figure out what it's like being that type of a person to be able to design for them.
For sure. For sure. Okay, I want to go back to functionality. We started our conversation talking about that. I want to circle back and ask you about certain materials that you feel like are either really good to have or not so great to have, or certain aspects of design that you shy away from or you lean into. And I'm talking about materials here. What are your thoughts? One of my favorite things to do, and I'm not a designer, okay? But when I'm looking for furniture, I love finding furniture that's weathered because I always feel like, hey, if it's weathered and something happens to it, it's going to look like it belongs, right?
Right.
So those are, that's what I love. I also do my best to not include breakables. So any lamps that I'm purchasing in most of my properties, I aim to find lamps that again are not breakable because again, stuff happens. But what are some materials that you either love working with or don't like working with?
Yes. The laundry list is long here as well. I have an entire like Excel file of do's and don'ts when it comes to materials, furniture functionality that we always reference back to whenever we're done with a design to just make sure that we haven't made the same mistake twice. And
Mhm,
because a lot of these are like learned through experience. And what I always
mhm,
tell people is you either buy right or you buy twice. And I have
mhm.
done plenty of buying twice in the 7 years that we've been in the Airbnb game. A few of those, though, are one, when it comes to rugs, I absolutely never use beige, white, cream, anything when it comes to rugs. Even the washable ones, like I thought I could get away with doing a ruggable or a tumble beige colored rug. It just, people just don't take off their shoes in B&Bs and they just get ruined every single time. Same thing for the high traffic spaces when it comes to like dining chairs or sofas or accent chairs in a living room. I try and stay away from light colors there. When it comes to the material on those high traffic areas, I always look at the rub count of the material itself. So oftentimes when you go on to furniture websites, if you're doing like a regular fabric that isn't a leather specifically, they will have a rub count where they'll put it through a process where a machine will like lightly sandpaper that fabric and you want it to have over 100,000 rub count. And that means that it's just super high quality, going to last, very durable fabric.
Okay.
And that doesn't apply to leather. Like when it comes to sofas, I almost always gravitate towards leather because I just know that it's meant to age. So it's just
Mhm,
going to get kind of scuffed up as time goes on and it gets prettier the more scuffed up it gets.
mhm,
And it just holds up really well. And then another one that I always check is when it comes to the dining chairs specifically, I myself will even lean back on dining chairs and put them up on those back two legs when I'm like sitting around a table playing cards or after dinner's done. And the reality is that you are going to have everyone from little kids all the way up to adults sitting on those dining chairs. And so, same thing with a dining chair. When you go to purchase a dining chair, you'll be able to look at the weight capacity of that dining chair. And a vast majority of them have a weight capacity of 250 pounds. And the reality is that we will host plenty of people that are over 250 pounds. And the
Mhm.
last thing that I want to do is find out that one of my guests broke a chair. And not only, like, of course, I have to replace the chair, but I just feel bad for the embarrassment that the guests felt in that
Right,
experience. And forbid they hurt themselves, you know?
right.
So that's another area where I'm like, double check that dining chair weight limit before you purchase to make sure that it's going to be durable for a B&B.
So good. Now, I want to ask you if someone is purchasing in a store,
Mhm.
is that information that they can find out in the store easily?
Sometimes it depends on where you're purchasing it from. If you're picking it up at, like, let's say Target, where you're like pulling it off of the sales floor and it's just like kind of a floating piece, one thing that
Mhm.
you can do is you can take a picture of it and reverse image search it on Google, and it'll oftentimes bring up the link to that chair, even at that exact store. And so a lot of times that's where you can find that information. Otherwise, if you're at a furniture store that you're buying something that is coming in a box, like an IKEA, oftentimes the box will have that label on it as well.
Interesting. And same way with the rub count. I've never heard of rub count. That's awesome.
Yeah. Yeah. You can even, like, I've had occasions where I have been able to figure out the material, but the website that I was purchasing it from didn't have the rub count. And sometimes you can reverse Google search that sofa
Ah,
and you can find it on another website that will address it, or you can figure out the material and then try and Google the materials rub count as well, separate of the sofa.
so good. And do you find when you are designing properties that you are designing 100% online? Because I'm not a designer and I am totally old school. I love to go and feel stuff and like see the color tone because I'm not good at judging color tone online. What would your recommendation be for someone like me who needs to get more with the times and purchase online? How do I equip myself to do that well?
Yeah, that's such a good question. Because I mean, there's nothing better than seeing it in person before you buy it. And it's just one of those portions of installing B&Bs that I think as time goes on and as we become more and more digital, it's just furniture stores are going out of business, you know? Like,
Right.
I
Right.
don't even know that in 10 years we will even have the option to see them in person as
Mm,
opposed to ordering them online. And so one of the portions within our interior design process that we've started doing that I don't think anybody else in the Airbnb space does is, and this is pulling it from my architecture past life, is we have started creating realistic renders of the rooms before we purchase anything. And so typically what you see with an interior designer is you get this kind of collage style where you'll get to see a clip of this sofa next to a clip of the chair, next to, a clip of the curtains behind it. But the reality is that you don't get to see scale, you don't get to see proportion, you don't get to see how those things kind of play together in a room. And all of that makes a big difference on whether you end up liking or not liking that end product. And so I think a combination of us doing those realistic renders so you get to see the room and what it's going to look like at the very end, all put together before you purchase anything, with the
mhm.
combination of working with a designer who has some experience around what materials you should and shouldn't be using. If you can combine those two things, then 9 times out of 10, the project turns out exactly how you'd hope because you've gotten to see everything before you actually clicked order and you've gotten the experience of somebody who has had to purchase a lot of things twice along the way and knows what's going to last and not last in a B&B.
Got it. Got it. All right. One last question, and then I want to move to another section. But if you are at all resonating with someone who has never worked with a designer before and they're nervous about, oh my gosh, I've got to sell a child in order to afford to work with a designer, what words of wisdom would you have for them on what they should budget to work with a designer and maybe why? they
Yeah,
should work with a designer.
absolutely.
And by the
Absolutely.
way, I'm not promoting that anybody actually sells a child. I thought I should just, I'm like, oh my gosh, somebody's going to think I'm actually promoting the sale of children. I'm totally joking, folks. Okay.
Oh, yeah, you would think that we don't have to include that disclaimer, but in these days you do.
You never know. You never know.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, when we work with clients, something that I always tell people, especially if they're new investors and if this is their first time working with an interior designer, is that when you're working with someone like us, I am never going to ask you to spend your money on anything that I haven't already spent my own money on.
Mm,
And I say that because when we first started investing, the first ever home that we purchased, we only had $65,000 to do the whole thing, the whole kit and caboodle to get it live on Airbnb. And when we were looking at Airbnb, the competitor that we were closest to, that was going to be our top competitor, was making $65,000 a year on Airbnb. And so I was looking at their design and I knew that I could design it better. I knew that we were going to have better amenities, but I just didn't understand because there was no other competition in that market. I didn't know how much more I would make off of designing it well and outfitting it with the correct amenities. It was like a total shot in the dark. I was just living on hopes and dreams at that point. And when we launched live on Airbnb with that property, that first year that we ran, we made well over 100 grand in revenue. And so
mm,
we doubled what our competition was making. And the only difference, I mean, same lake, their property, arguably from an exterior and lot perspective, was nicer than ours. Ours was just much more aesthetic on the interior. It functioned much better and it had the amenities that people were looking for. And so, for anyone who's looking at hiring an interior designer, what I always tell people to do, and I will do this, I'll go through this practice with my clients of understanding and really being able to see properties that aren't already designed well versus properties that aren't, and then looking at the difference in revenue that those properties are making and getting them to understand that in theory, a designer should pay for him or herself. Like,
mm,
yes, it is an additional fee to swallow up front, but I always try and get the clients to think about the fee that you're swallowing up front. You arguably will make more than that in year one off of having a well outfitted B&B. And you need to be thinking about the fact that that B&B in theory is going to run for the next decade. And so you're
yeah.
going to be making 10x what you're spending on B every year after. Your clientele is going to be better because you're going to be servicing a nicer clientele. They're going to be more respectful of your space. They're going to be return guests. And so just across the board, as someone who at first designed B&Bs that were really cheap and not well done, and then started designing them with quality product and quality amenities, the experience of you running it on the back end is night and day different. And I would highly recommend just doing it right the first time as opposed to going through the pain that we went through at the beginning.
Love that. Love that. And I second the fact that when you put higher quality items in your property and you attract higher quality guests, they absolutely take better care of your property.
Yep. A
Hands
million
down.
percent. Yeah. This was one thing that really changed my mind on that. And it's a story that I tell guests all the time. There was a study done that put a car that was not, they had two cars. They put both of these cars, one in a nice area, one in a not nice area, but the car was completely in good condition. And they left that car there for a month and nobody touched either car, nobody damaged it, nothing happened to it. Then, both in the nice area and in the not nice area, they knocked out one window of each car. And within a month, the entire car in both locations was ransacked. And so it just goes to show that humans, when they see something nice, they want to keep it nice. But when they
Mhm.
see something that's already like kind of crappy and doesn't seem well taken care of, and it doesn't seem like anybody cares about that thing, they then don't care about that thing. And
Mhm.
so same rules apply to B&Bs. Your guests can tell when you care and it makes them care.
Amen, sister. So good. Okay. I want to move to the lightning round. All right. So I'm going to ask you some questions and just ask you to answer with the very first thing that comes to mind.
Okay?
First question is, where is your favorite place to vacation?
Austria.
Ooh, now that's an interesting one.
Yeah, we went to a really great wellness resort in Austria a couple of years ago, and I just have yet to have a single hospitality experience even be able to touch it.
Really? What was it? Like, if you could name one thing that just made it magical, what was it?
It was this wellness environment that they had in this resort. It was the most intense, well outfitted cold plunge, hot therapy, cold therapy, heated pool that jet out into a pond situation. And it was family owned and operated. And I don't know, it just was one of those experiences where it was like the most aesthetic thing I've ever had in experienced in my entire life. And then also the hospitality and just the way that you move throughout the space was just so well thought through. So every single time I think about if I could only go back to one vacation in my life, it would be that one.
That's so cool. So cool. All right, next question. What's one place you've never been that you want to visit?
Banff is very high on my list.
Now, that is so funny because I literally just wrapped up an interview with someone else for the podcast, and they were saying their favorite place to travel was Banff. So there you go.
Love to hear it. Love to hear it. That's very high on my list. Banff and Patagonia are the two that are like top of my list for next places to go.
Very fun. Very fun. Those are two very different places, though. So
It's very true.
you posted on what you decide on.
Right.
All right, next question. What's one thing you know now that you wished you knew when you were starting out in the world of short term rentals?
Oh, I mean, not to take it right back to design, but I wish that when I was first starting out, I was so scared to spend money. I was so scared to lose money because it took me so long to save up that money to invest in anything to begin with. And so I
Mhm.
just was going about it, just not fully trusting the process, even though I could see that other people were making more money who had better properties. It just had a little bit of that get rich quick scheme still in my blood. And so I wish back then that I would have just fully trusted the process from the beginning and not had to learn all those tough lessons of why you outfit your property properly from the get go. So I wish that was something I could go back and just scream at myself from the get go.
But you learned it. It's all good. It's all good. All right, next question. What is the best piece of advice you've ever been given?
Well, I would say the one that I think comes up most often in growing businesses and dealing with guests and anything around my career in general, is that everyone feels their own pain the most. And
Mhm.
so, whether it be the fact that I have a day that's exploding and my cleaner is blowing up my phone over something that seems like a really small problem to me, they're feeling their pain the most. And same thing with clients. Like, say, one piece of 50 pieces of furniture that we ordered doesn't fit and they're crumbling because they're hosting their first guest in 2 days or something.
Yeah.
And I know that it's a very quick problem that we can solve and it's not the end of the world. And I know that their guests are going to be fine. They're feeling their pain the most. And so I think that's just something that me and my husband try and remind each other of constantly because my problem is not the biggest problem in the room. Their problem is not the biggest problem in the room, but our individual problems are always the ones that we're going to feel the most because they're
Mhm.
impacting us. And so it just helps me and my husband be a little bit more empathetic towards customer service in general, whether that be with our guests or our clients or our employees.
Absolutely. That's wonderful advice. Wonderful advice. Okay, last question. What's one thing and or person that you're grateful for today?
Ooh, one person that I'm grateful for today. Well, I'm going to go with the obvious choice of I'm going to say my husband. This year, or I guess over the last few years, we've run our own businesses side by side. And last year, we just had a moment where I was like, why are we running these separate of one another? Like, why, we did it based on necessity, I guess, at some point in time. And so last year, I made the decision to start running side by side and just building something together. And I just really appreciate having someone in my ear every single day who's encouraging, who gets the entrepreneurial game, who is just as tolerant of risk as I am and sees the same vision that I do. And I just feel like it's a huge privilege to have somebody to run alongside of who believes in everything that I believe in. And so I just feel like the last 6 months of our relationship has been really sweet in a way that I guess maybe I didn't expect to have. So definitely
Aw,
him.
that's awesome. That's awesome. I hope he's listening, even though He may not. We'll just say, hey, what's your
I'll
hubby's
take
name?
offense to this one.
So, Ethan, listen up.
Yeah, I'll send it to him in the DM so he makes sure to listen.
There you go. Sarah, if folks want to find out more about you and or potentially explore how you might be able to help them with their properties, what is the best place for them to find you online?
Yeah. On Instagram, the company that we run is called Studio Host. And so our Instagram handle is at studiohost.co. Website is studiohost.co. And then on TikTok, we're studiohost.co as well. I also have a personal account at Sarah Glidewell on or on Instagram. And then my professional and personal on TikTok is all the same thing. So you can follow us on any of those social medias.
Love it. Sarah, thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me. This was a blast.